Hello, I'm Claire Smith and welcome to my channel. So today I'm going to be trying 10 different hyped fragrances from 10 different brands, and I'm just going to talk you through my thoughts on them and tell you whether I'm interested in buying them or not. So if you haven't seen me before, I'm Claire Smith and I make videos all about perfume, perfume science, perfume history, perfume psychology, and I also just do some straight perfume reviews. So if that kind of content interests you, then please do consider subscribing if you haven't done already. And please also like this video if you do enjoy this kind of content. So let's get on with this. So the first fragrance I'm going to try is one from Dries van Noten. And this fragrance is called Soie Malaquais. So the first time I smelled Soie Malaquais was actually on somebody else. And I was meeting up with Chantal Tiffany from YouTube. And she was wearing this fragrance. And honestly, she smelled absolutely stunning in it. And she had it in her bag. She had the bottle in her bag, and I was looking at this bottle, and the bottle is equally stunning as how the fragrance smelled on her. And I was just really curious to try this fragrance, and I was so pleased when Lizzie Rose and Jones here on YouTube sent me a sample. So this fragrance on Chantal smelled like milk bottle sweets. It was absolutely gorgeous, and it just smelled so sweet, and it smelled almost like a sandalwood kind of milkiness. But actually I think it was probably the chestnut that was smelling in this fragrance. So on me, when I first spray this, I get the blackcurrant. The blackcurrant is quite a dulled blackcurrant. And I would say the only other thing I get is really a cocoa. There are sort of like background florals, but it's all very indistinct. It's something that really melds in together. I guess that really is kind of the silky smooth feel of this fragrance. I guess that fits the name really. It is just really hard to pick things out from this fragrance. But you just get a very sweet, fruity, floral, warm, rich kind of sweetness really. I think this fragrance, as it dries down, it just does become creamier, and I guess the cocoa becomes a little bit more prominent on me, but it never really reaches the milkiness that I smelt on Chantal. And I think if I hadn't smelt this fragrance on Chantal, I wouldn't be as disappointed as I am with how it smells on me. I just don't smell as delicious as Chantal did. And that's the reason really that I'm not interested in this one, because I just think it probably smells better on other people. I think I've seen quite a split opinion on this one. I think it's very much like a love or just not bothered kind of fragrance. And I guess it might just reflect how milky it smells on you. But yeah, on me, it just doesn't come off as nicely as it did on Chantal. I got a lot of longevity out of this. It was, really long lasting. It was really quite a strong one as well, this one. I think, it's just a very expensive fragrance. It's £245 for 100ml. I don't think they sell it in smaller sizes, I'm not sure. But yeah, it's just not one that's for me, but it still is a very nice fragrance. That's Soie Malaquais by Dries van Noten. So the next fragrance is one that was sent to me by Kay, or Erratic Alien, here on YouTube and on Instagram. I'll link her page down below in case you do want to check her out. So Kay sent me a sample of Café Rose by Tom Ford. So Café Rose, I think, is a re-release or a reformulation of an original fragrance. And Café Rose is something that I was expecting coffee, and I was expecting rose just from the name. That was my first impression of what I thought I should get. But I didn't really get any coffee in this. So it opens with quite a strong, dry, almost vintage smelling kind of rose fragrance. And I think there's also something that's a little bit sort of citric. And I guess that's probably the frankincense. It smells a little bit limey almost. That's really quite light though in comparison to the rose. This quickly morphs into a really heavy, really soapy Bulgarian rose with a lot of woodiness. There's also a dry spiciness to this, and actually the rose changes throughout the fragrance. So later on it makes me think of face creams, rose scented face creams, but it's definitely got more of a powderiness than that. And it takes a few wears for you to kind of appreciate that it's actually quite interesting. I think for a lot of people, the opening is just going to be so off-putting because it is quite a vintage smelling rose. If you're not used to that kind of rose, I think it's just going to turn so many people off. I really don't think this one is going to be a massive hit for Tom Ford. I think it's something that it's just not, it's not a lovable fragrance, this one, I don't think. I think for me with this one, I felt a little bit underwhelmed when I first tried it, but actually with trying it more, I like it more, but I just don't think that it's ever going to get to a stage where I love this fragrance. I have other rose fragrances in my collection. I have things like Chopard Love, and I think those really cover this kind of area for me and probably do it a little bit better at a better price point. but I did enjoy trying it, and I guess with this one, it's a really good longevity and it does project quite well as well. And it's, you know, it's that Tom Ford quality that you would come to expect. So yeah, Cafe Rose from Tom Ford, not one that I'm really that interested in. So the next fragrance is one from YSL, and this is a fragrance that was really, really hyped. And I feel like YSL deliberately kept the stock levels low to create even more hype over this fragrance. So this is Babycat, and this fragrance was sent to me by Melanie's Perfumes, and I'm going to leave her channel link down below because I was her first subscriber here on YouTube, and I just really want to support her channel. And she's been so nice to send me all of these samples that I'm going to talk about. Well, I'm going to talk about a few more in this video, but she sent me about five samples, and it was just really lovely of her. So please do go check out Melanie's Perfumes. So Babycat just wasn't how I expected it to be at all. And I'd heard it was a leathery fragrance, I knew it was vanilla, but I just didn't really imagine it to smell like it does smell. So to me, the opening of this is really leathery, it's really loud, and the leather here is tinged with saffron. The saffron is really quite prominent in the opening. It also has quite a resinous feel to it. As this dries down, it doesn't really change that much. I guess the leather becomes a little bit less prominent, becomes a little bit softer. Also, the vanilla sort of pops out a little bit, quite a smoky, almost vanilla to it. And also it becomes a little bit ambery. It's definitely a warm fragrance. I think the thing that's really shocked me with this one is just how much the saffron in it has really curtailed my enjoyment of it. I think I must really struggle with saffron in fragrances because I just found it really off-putting in this fragrance. And it's for that reason I'm just not that interested in this one. And I feel like that's a real shame because there are elements to this that I really do like, but the leatheriness here is just not doing it for me. And leather is a note that I normally really do like, but just not with saffron. I like it more with labdanum and other notes that can really give you that leathery feel, but with saffron it's just a no. This fragrance really makes me think of people sort of doing a fashion shoot almost in a desert or something like that. Just some people out in a really hot sun, I guess, is how this fragrance makes me feel. So that's Babycat by YSL, great longevity and did project really well. So the next fragrance is one from Miller Harris, and this is Black Datura, and it's a fragrance that I got from the Miller Harris website. So this fragrance I was really excited to try it because the notes looked really up my street. So it has tuberose, it has lily, and you know, those are just win-wins for me normally. So this, when I first sprayed it, immediately reminded me of Tom Ford's Orchid Soleil, which is a fragrance I absolutely love but is sadly discontinued, and I do hoard my bottle or the remnants of my bottle. And I thought, wow, I can, you know, stop hoarding this and I can buy a bottle of Black Datura, it's all going to be fine. But yeah, it just doesn't have that Orchid Soleil DNA in the dry down. It really diverges from Orchid Soleil. So Orchid Soleil dries down into this really lovely kind of nutty vanilla, creamy vanilla kind of fragrance in the dry down. This doesn't. This has more of a like a leathery feel to it, but it's a very gentle leathery feel. And really the white florals in this just sort of die down a little bit, but it really doesn't have a very distinctive base to me. It's something that's just, it's something that's quite woody almost, but it's definitely got like a little bit of a spiciness to it almost. I think this one, it just doesn't do it for me in the dry down as much as it does in the opening. I really like those strong white florals in the opening, and I just wish it stayed like that. I think this fragrance had amazing longevity. It really projected as well. It's really quite a strong fragrance, but I think smelling this close up, it had some off-putting things for me. So smelling this close up, it actually made me think of black bin liners when you get them straight out of the packet, that kind of plasticky smell almost. And I don't know whether that's just, you know, me being a fragrance reviewer and smelling it really close to my skin and maybe getting something that other people don't get, but that really spoilt it for me. And whilst I think it's a perfectly fine fragrance in the air, close up it just wasn't for me. I do still think it's a nice fragrance overall though, and I would highly recommend checking this one out and trying it, especially if you like Orchid Soleil, because the first time I tried it, I was just over the moon. And I really liked it. And then the second and third and fourth time I've tried it, I'm not being quite so over the moon with it. And I've started to notice other things. So yeah, definitely one to get a sample of. So that's Black Datura by Miller Harris. So the next fragrance is one from Dior, and it's Vanilla Diorama. And this one again was sent to me by Melanie's Perfumes. So this fragrance, I was kind of expecting a very gourmand vanilla, quite a sweet vanilla, and I definitely didn't get that. So it opens with a lot of cardamom. It's a cool, spicy cardamom and vanilla fragrance, and the vanilla here is very powdery. It actually makes me think of Johnson's Baby Powder and Johnson's Baby Shampoo. It's not actually a soapy fragrance at all though, so I'm not really sure exactly why I think of the baby shampoo other than just the smell of this. As this dries down, you get a background cocoa feeling, and the cocoa here is just giving it a warmth. It's nothing really too chocolatey, but you can smell it a little bit more prominently as it dries down further. It becomes a little bit more chocolatey as it dries down, but it's never really ever overtaking the vanilla. It's still very much a vanilla forward fragrance. There's also some booziness, and that's really only smelt in the mid part of this fragrance, and it's only very background, and it just adds more warmth to the fragrance. I think really overall the dry down of the fragrance is very much a vanilla incense, and the vanilla incense is very powdery, and that really makes me think of Guerlain's Shalimar. This fragrance doesn't ever get to that kind of latex, that powdery latex glove kind of smell that Shalimar has for me, but it gets quite close, and it's almost too close for me because I'm not a massive fan of Shalimar. I think if you like Shalimar, you'll probably enjoy this kind of vanilla, but it's just not one for me. I like a more sort of vanilla extract kind of style vanilla, and this is just too powdery and too old school for me. This fragrance was really long lasting and it did project well. I'd say out of the Dior Privé line, it's not Toba colour, it's not Eau Noir in longevity and projection, but it's definitely up there. It's definitely not a lighter one from this range. Yeah, just not for me, this one. But I could see someone really enjoying this if they loved Shalimar. So that's Dior's Vanilla Diorama. So the next fragrance is one that I got from M, and this one is Bob Annicke No. 6. So this fragrance, I had no preconceptions about it. I didn't know anything about this brand. I'd never tried anything from this brand before. And this one really surprised me actually. I do quite like it, but I don't think it's quite me. So this one opens quite boozy with plum, and there's also a bit of spiciness, but I can't really make out exactly which spices. I would say that there was probably cardamom maybe a little bit and maybe some cinnamon here. It's quite warm. It's definitely got a heat to it. It feels warm on my skin from the spiciness in here. Also, there's a bit of a resinous feel, a bit of a leathery feel, and there's also rose and incense very prominently here. And the rose is very sweet. It's almost like a syrupy rose, but it's quite dry. And I guess that's maybe from the incense. The fragrance at points can smell like Indian sweets, and it can also smell like a cinnamon cake. It's really quite delicious at points, but I wouldn't say it's overall a really gourmand fragrance. It definitely has gourmand touches to it though. Yeah, I like this one. I think really the lasting impression of this is really the rose and the incense. And I guess the first time I tried it, I was wowed by a particular point in this fragrance with the Indian sweet kind of feel. But I think that really doesn't stick around for me in subsequent wears, and I don't notice that as much. But I did really like that when I initially tried it. I think this fragrance was really long lasting. It was really quite strong as well, and I've seen it quite reasonably priced recently. I think I've seen it for £80 for 100ml in TK Maxx. So if you can lay your hands on this to try, then I would recommend trying it, but I don't think this is one I want to buy. So that's Annicke No. 6 by Bob. So the next fragrance is one from the House of Rouge, and I was sent this fragrance by Mel. So this isn't Melanie's Perfumes, this is Melbert here on YouTube. So thank you so much, Mel. So this fragrance is supposed to be a date fragrance, yeah? I just don't get dates in this fragrance at all. I'm just going to put that out there. I must be mad, but it doesn't smell like dates to me. But I guess my only experience of dates are those preserved ones in sugar that you get that have clearly been sitting around for months and probably have nothing much to do with a date at all. I would say this fragrance really is more about the incense. It's more about the incense, more about the spices. It's more about sort of something that's fragrant, that's oudy, that's leathery almost. It's definitely got more going on with it than being, just a straight up sweet fragrance. I'd say this one's a little bit sweet. It's definitely got some honey in there, but it's more of a richness the honey adds rather than more sweetness. This does leave an enormous trail though. I took this to work and got other people to wear it, and I could smell them all down the corridor. It's a really strong one. But I would say it's sort of like middling longevity, but when it's around, it's very, very strong. I think I like this one. It just wasn't what I was expecting, and I just don't think that it's for me. I wasn't really expecting the oud actually in this fragrance. Given the name, I should have been, because it's called the House of Oud. But yeah, it's quite a subtle oud, but it's definitely there. And yeah, just not one that I want to rush out and buy. But I really did enjoy trying this, and I do think it's quite a different kind of fragrance. That's the House of Oud Dates Delight. So the next fragrance is one from Parfums de Marly, and it's Herod. And I got this fragrance from Melanie's Perfumes. So this fragrance for me was a complete surprise, because I'd heard this fragrance described as a tobacco and vanilla fragrance. And yeah, they're certainly there. But for me, the overarching note in this is ISO-E Super. This is a cloak. It feels like you're wearing an invisible cloak of ISO-E Super, and that's going to protect you and shield you from the world. It is that strong on the ISO-E Super. So this to me as well does have that tobacco, it does have that vanilla, but the tobacco here is not sweet, sticky, resinous feeling. It's more of a very light and very dry tobacco. Something that's very, very background to me. The vanilla similarly is very light, and it's something that isn't powdery, but it also isn't syrupy. It's very much a middle ground kind of vanilla. I think for me, the thing that stands out for this fragrance, other than the ISO-E Super, is the cinnamon and also the cypriol. And that gives it a kind of erythritol toothpaste kind of feel to it. It's very sort of herbal smelling or spicy smelling in a way. I think I described this fragrance as smelling a little bit like the feel of a Fox's Glacier Mint. It's not minty, but it has that kind of coolness, that smoothness, that clearness because of the ISO-E Super. It's just a very synthetic smelling fragrance, and yeah, it's got good longevity. It projects well, but it's not so strong, but it's just something that's very present. It's very long lasting. It's hard to get rid of. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it, but it just didn't give me any joy, this one. I think if you like fragrances like Valleya and other fragrances in the Parfums de Marly catalogue that are very heavy on aroma chemicals, you might like this one. But for me, this was incredibly synthetic. So that's Herod by Parfums de Marly. So the next fragrance is one from Ormonde, and I've tried Levant. I've never tried anything else from Ormonde. I didn't really know what to expect. But given the price point of this fragrance, which I think is £130 for 50ml, I was expecting something quite natural, really very photorealistic kind of fragrance, and that's really not what I got. So this fragrance reminded me a lot of Moschino Fresh Couture, which is a fragrance that I think shares quite a few notes with this one. So this is a citrus, floral, ambroxan-laden musk fragrance. It does smell very orangey in the beginning, but with a ton of ambroxan. If you like fragrances like Baccarat Rouge 540, if you like fragrances like Cloud, you will probably like this fragrance. Really, the ambroxan is the most dominant note in the opening, and I found it quite overwhelming actually. I instantly didn't like this one because of the ambroxan. I think as this dries down, the ambroxan does die back, and the ambroxan begins to give it a bit of an aquatic feel almost. But there's also peony in this fragrance, and the peony definitely amps up as this fragrance dries down. It begins to smell a bit like a posh hotel almost, like toilets in a posh hotel. And I don't mean that offensively. I mean that it's something that's a joy to walk into, something that smells clean, something that smells watery, fresh, citrusy, aquatic, that kind of feel. Definitely like a high quality floral fragrance, but it just doesn't ever smell natural. It smells like a product almost. And I guess that's what I'm not loving. It is very enveloping though, because of all that ambroxan. You definitely do get a cloud around you because of the ambroxan. And I guess this is one that does last a long time. I bet people can smell this on you. I bet it does project. It does smell nice in the air, just not close up because of that ambroxan. It's quite heavy. It's almost headachy, the ambroxan in this fragrance. It just wasn't one for me, but I guess, this kind of DNA is very popular. So if you like that kind of thing, you probably will like this fragrance. Levant is just not for me. So that's Levant by Ormonde. So the final fragrance is again one from Auratic Alien K, and this fragrance is called Loubihorse, and it's one from Christian Louboutin. So I've never tried anything from Christian Louboutin before, but I was talking to someone about this fragrance, and they misheard what I said. So I said Loubihorse, and they thought I said Loubehorse, and they said, oh, that's a very daring name for a fragrance. And I thought, no, they haven't been that daring. So Loubihorse opens with a very powdery, very custardy, but very light vanilla. And actually in the opening as well, there's a bit of a citrusy feel to it, but it's very, very light. And I think the listed note is neroli, but I wouldn't have pinned it on neroli because it's very, very gentle. It's not as sharp as neroli normally is. I think this fragrance overall is something that makes me think of something that I would wear to bed. It's very light, very non-invasive, very close to skin. And yeah, just something that's very, very gentle, really. In the opening as well, along with that vanilla, there's something a little bit warm and spicy, but very, very gentle. Something like a nutmeg or an allspice in this fragrance. As this dries down further, there is sort of something that turns it a little bit slightly salty, maybe a little bit savoury, maybe even a little bit marine. And I've seen on the top of the bottle of this, it's not a horse, it's a seahorse. So I guess that feeling could be what they're trying to portray, something of the sea. But it's really not a very strongly marine fragrance. If you're put off by that, and I am put off by that, this isn't something that's going to turn you off. There's also a slightly green feel to this fragrance almost. I'm not really sure what it is, but there's something sort of slightly light green to me about this fragrance. I think this one just didn't give me much of an impression really. It's just very light, very airy. And I guess that's nice, but I think for £235 for 100ml, I think I'd want something a little bit punchier. It's quite distinctive, but I don't find it that special. So that's Loubihorse by Christian Louboutin. So that's the final fragrance in this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed it, then please press the like button, and please also consider subscribing if you haven't done already. And please let me know, which fragrances have you been trying recently? Which ones have you thought were overhyped, or which ones have you seen the joy in? Please let me know down below, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.